And on this Political Pulse, we are joined by Senate Majority Whip Randy Deibert of Spearfish. Randy, thank you so much for coming down here and doing the show. I think you had to have been one of the first interviews I ever did here at KOTA Territory.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, we've had a long relationship in a short time.
So, you know, I should ask you this to start this off. How long have you been serving in the legislature, and how have you tried to prioritize Black Hills issues?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I just finished my third session, so I'm in my second term. I'm very fortunate because my district is my county, and as a county commissioner for 7 years prior to that, and I'm a native of the Spearfish area. So I have a very strong attachment and historical knowledge of the Black Hills. So you know, I try to educate people when I'm in Pierre about the uniqueness of the Black Hills, and those that believe it's a playground, I try to give them more information.
Gotcha. I do want to take things to a pretty serious note here right off the top, because we are living in an era, a historical era really. Last week we saw a tragedy. Conservative influencer Charlie Kirk was gunned down speaking at Utah University, just a couple of states away. What do you think that shooting says about the state of political discourse right now in America?
Well, I'm gonna back up a minute, you know, and it's a tragedy, and as my wife always says, be kind, and that has to be our message: be kind. The attitudes throughout the United States and the world right now of anger, we just don't have a place for that. So that's changed my life. This is just another instance that influences my life and my perspective. You know, I was fortunate or unfortunate, it depends how you look at it, to be an adolescent when both Kennedys were assassinated, Martin Luther King was assassinated, Malcolm X. I mean, I can go on. And in our nation, from those things, grows stronger. I think it was it Nietzsche that said, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." And we will be stronger because of this. It's just too bad it has to be a tragedy to do that.
When you first heard of this, I don't know if you saw the video. A lot of people saw the video, which was just absolutely horrific. What went through your mind, just your initial reaction to the whole situation?
Well, you know, I was in an international forum at the time in Deadwood, what we hosted, and it really changed the mood in the room for all of us. It made things real to us. You know, you're there trying to build relationships and get to know people. And it reset the tone to how serious what we do does. And it took a while that day for that group to rebound and get past it, but it really changed the tone. And then when we hit the streets afterwards, the tone was different throughout the county.
Yeah. You know, I want to go back to my original question, just because you are in a state legislature and you have the position of gathering together votes, which means I'm sure you've been part of some pretty hot political conversations, to say the least. That shooting, did it indicate anything to you about the state of political discourse right now?
Well, if you're talking about in South Dakota, with all the new people in the legislature the last year, we just need to get to know each other better. We find that it may start with discourse, but we have more in common than we don't. And I was fortunate to be elected a whip, and in my whip group it's very diverse, and that's good because sooner or later you get to know all these people. There's only 35 of us, right? You get to know these people, and even though you might have differences, you become allies and friends, and you don't wish harm on anyone. So when you get to know people, your attitude changes. The anger usually evaporates.
Do you think that's a problem with American politics right now? My question was actually more about American politics, but it's interesting how you related this to South Dakota. But my question is just on the U.S. side. You're talking about this large body of Congress. Do you think if more of these members, even from different parties, got to know each other, these conversations would simmer down and become a lot less boiled, to say the least?
Yeah, you know, that's a big bunch of people with a lot of different positions. And you have to put your position aside to build a relationship. And I can't imagine trying to do it on that scale. we have a very large government in D.C., very large bureaucracy, and it's really hard to have a conversation like we're having right now. So I don't know how you fix that. The Senate would be a little less, but it's still, I mean, when you have yourself and 20 or 30 staff members, how do you get to spend time just like we're doing right now? And I think that's the key.
South Dakota uniquely is a less populated state. Do you think that does help with some of the political discourse here, just being that the state has, I believe, around 1 million people? Have we crossed that threshold?
We're still well under that, at least in my opinion, well under it.
Okay.
But you know, as my wife says, you talk to somebody long enough in South Dakota and you find out you're related. That's the small state. You know, it's like when we hosted in Deadwood last week, the small town, you know, and to a lot of the other states, we're the small town, and I think that helps. We have more in common because of that small population.
Would you like to see the discourse between the Republican and Democratic Party on a national scale simmer down a little bit? And if so, do you see a path forward for that tension to ease?
Well, that's a great question. I can't speak for some of those people, obviously, because I only interact with a handful, Wyoming and South Dakota congressionals, and a little bit of Nebraska. I can't imagine how you would bridge that gap unless you can get in a room like this and get to know that person or persons and just hammer it out. So.
Okay, well, we will take things back locally here. Talking about property taxes, this was a big issue the last legislative session. I believe it's going to be another big issue this next legislative session. You were part of the property tax task force, which always twists me up just trying to say. And there have been a handful of meetings. So far, what do you think's been the biggest development to come from those meetings, and do you see policy shaping up?
Well, I've been pushing hard to develop policy out of our work groups, and nothing's came out of our work group substantially or recommendation to our entire committee, and I'm pushing to have that. What are the policies we're talking about? You know, we've had a lot of public testimony, and this is my third summer on property taxes, and I've heard the testimony, and it's very similar over the last 3 years, and we have not had something come to the top. Senator Melhoff is going to talk about his theory for an education tax. I think we need to have that conversation. You know, we hear about people moving out, being chased out of their homes because of their property taxes, and I've researched that, and we're not there yet, but we could be very easily. We have to remind ourselves that we're the second lowest tax state in the nation, and we expect certain services. And when you only have the number of people we have and the land that we're managing, those services sometimes outweigh the ability for us to pay the taxes.
Can you break down that education tax that you were talking about?
Well, the way I understand it is it would be a 1% education tax. It would be collected like a sales tax, and it would offset a large amount of, especially owner-occupied taxation. I think it's targeted at the school district relief, because we talk about in our committee about disconnecting property taxes from school funding. And that has some merit, but you also need local control. The decisions on what you spend need to come at the local level. They know their needs. How can we in peer determine what each little school district needs for their situation? And they're all unique. Just like counties, we've had that discussion year after year. Every county is unique. Every school district's unique. And so I like it because it produces offsetting revenue. And in my district, where we have a lot of tourism and a lot of visitation, then we wouldn't be paying it with just local dollars. It would be the influx of the out-of-state people that use our facilities and don't live here to pay for education. So it has some merit. I really want to hear what Senator Melhoff has to talk about.
So aside from that, are there any other key proposals that you could point to?
I have not seen any. I've asked the subcommittee leaders, I've asked leadership in the committee, and I haven't seen anything. So hopefully we're going to bring something forward on Monday, was our next meeting, and then get get those ideas out there so that we can hear testimony on the ideas. I don't know how you make a decision on a new policy without hearing some testimony on it. So I'm driving to get something out of there based on my past experience in summer studies, leading summer studies, to have ideas out there as soon as you can so you can talk about it and see if it's viable.
I know earlier this summer that the Property Tax Task Force had said that the goal was to cut property taxes by at least half. What is your sense on the ability to get that done? I mean, obviously you're pointing to kind of a lack of policy coming out of there aside from the policy you pointed out. Do you think that's going to be possible? I mean, just through some of the research you've done on this?
Well, if you look at the scope that they're dealing with, that was outside the scope, and I voted no on that. I don't know how you set that goal when you don't have the information in front of you on how you're going to accomplish it. And in my comments on the motion, it was, I want a practical solution that we can talk through rather than making these unachievable goals. It would be great if we could get there, but you're not going to get there just by cutting. You know, how do you even cut maybe 50 to 70 million? It's very difficult. And the dollars that we're talking about at 50% can vary from 400 million to 700 million, depending on what you mean. So
one proposal that it seems like has gone a little bit quiet was the governor's proposal to allow counties to enact their own sales tax, which would create a fund to offset property taxes. Was that discussed at any of these meetings? It's
come up a couple times. The governor's representatives, Jim Twilliger and Kurt Chafee, have brought it up. I think we'll probably have that discussion again at our last meeting. You know, it has merit, but I remind people that for 6 years before I was in the legislature, we were trying to get a county sales tax for infrastructure that the people had to vote on. You had to have the bond in place just to offset those costs with sales tax on building new facilities that you needed rather than putting on a property tax burden, and we could not get it through. The good news is the governor's behind it. You know, it would help certain counties. The counties that you and I live in, it would help. Mm-hmm. It's not going to help Buffalo County or Harding County because they don't have the retail, right? But it will help the Black Hills and the eastern part of the state and some of the places in between. You know, the 9 or 10 counties that have a big responsibility for services, it will help. So.
Now, you used to be a county commissioner. The other question would be, what would be the appetite of all these counties to actually want to enact that as well? I would imagine that would be its own discussion, right, if this was to go through.
Yeah, well, Senate Bill 216 last year, which put a cap on their growth, has really stifled some of these counties that have a lot of growth. You know, in my county, which is my district, our mill levy's gone down a great deal, over 25% since I was a commissioner, because our values have went up. That's how it's supposed to balance. But with a cap on there, when you can't take growth, what are you going to cut? And you might have to invoke that half cent to maybe buy new equipment or pay for a remodel of your facilities or some IT upgrade. You might have to invoke that because you just don't have the cash to do it. Lawrence County's always been very, very conservative and always managed their money very well, but it's had an impact there because of the growth.
Now, please correct me if I'm wrong through any of this, because right now I'm working on complete memory here for this next question here. But if I'm remembering correctly, you had a proposal that was to restore the sales tax back to 8%?
Yeah, I'll go there.
All right.
Senate Bill 121.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, my proposal. Well, first of all, I had the proposal along with the now Lieutenant Governor on House Bill 1019 to invoke a 5% sales tax and significantly decrease property taxes, especially at the school district level.
Right now, the sales tax is 4.2%.
4.2. Yeah.
And okay, sorry, I knew it was either the high fours or I guess it's 5 flat. Okay.
But my bill was different than that. It said when I wanted to take off the sunset clause that we put on a few years ago on the 4.5 cents. So I wanted to take that off early and take that 0.3, which is about $112 to $120 million. I wanted to take that off now and put sales tax at 4.5 cents and take that 120 or 112 or whatever it is $1 million and give property tax relief. So the sunset doesn't have that language on it, and it's scheduled to come off, I think, in 2027. And I just want, if that comes off, I want that dedicated to property tax relief, not just go in the general fund and spend on something else. So that was what I was trying to do. I'm going to bring that bill again this year. I'm going to tweak it a little bit that makes it very clear that if it comes off, that money goes to property tax relief.
Not that it will come off for property tax relief.
Yeah. If it comes off, it's not dedicated to property tax relief. So I'm saying if it comes off or when it comes off, that it'll be dedicated to property tax relief. And I'm going to look at what we can do on the agricultural arena to see that they're not punished when buying big equipment by that increase. So there's got to be I've got to do some work on that to make it more palatable across the board.
Maybe make an exemption for some of those large purchases, because I have heard that is a concern of the farmers and the ranchers, is if we get hit with a higher sales tax, we are buying very expensive equipment.
Yes, and they're not alone. In my world, I buy something the size of this coffee cup, $60,000. So
that coffee is $60,000, believe it or not. Doesn't it taste like $60,000 coffee?
Tastes like studio coffee. But all of us are in that market. The equipment that I buy for my profession is very expensive, and I'm not exempt. I don't buy $1 million piece of equipment. I just don't. But so where's the line there? And we need to keep our producers. Bottom line. So.
We'll move on to another hot topic here in South Dakota, and this is really, I believe, going to gain some heat next week, and this is the governor's $650 million prison proposal. The legislature is set to vote on this on my birthday, actually, on Tuesday, which this airs Monday, so tomorrow, from when this airs. Are you a fan of this latest proposal?
Well, I'll mention that Monday is our summer study on property tax, too, so. But, it's taken me a long time to get where I'm at. With my background in construction and design, I looked at this maybe a little different than some. And going through building a large facility in Lawrence County at, $52 million for a county that has 27,000 people, that was a big item. It's proportional to what we're doing now. And on your birthday, are you going to be as old as our existing prison?
No, I think I'm going to be... I'm horrible with math. You never want to ask a journalist math without a calculator.
Well, I'm sure there's about 120 years difference there.
Well, I'll be 32. Okay. So I don't know what that...
It's significant.
It's significant.
But
it's more than 100 years older than I am. We'll put it that way.
But, I think that overall, most of the legislators believe we need a new facility. Okay? I think they believe that. It's always difficult when you're spending the largest money ever in state history to build something. I think the task force did a great job. I mean, they worked hard, they rolled up their sleeves, and I engaged more heavily after their recommendations. I did not spend time going through all of the proposals. I isolated the ones that they brought forward. I think the new location operationally is better. I had some concerns about the conditions of the site. I think I've had them answered. I had some concerns about the soft costs. I have those answered. So I'm pretty comfortable. I'm not there yet, but I'm real close. I have some other concerns about how the bill is worded and where it's going to start. I'm a firm believer that the bill should be introduced in the House because they're the ones that had voted on this previously. They have some strong opinions from their last experience on voting on the bill that was introduced during session. They can work those out, and the Senate's ready to go.
Okay. So you believe it's better to start it in the House, let them work out the kinks, and then let the Senate decide second?
Yes, because they've already debated it. They can continue their debate, and I just think that's the best place to start it.
But you say you're real close.
Yeah, I'm real close. I continue to have interaction with the Henry Carlson Group and the Lieutenant Governor and staff of the governors and leadership within our caucus and within our chamber.
The South Dakota Freedom Caucus, they've come out against this plan. I'm sure you've seen this. They are saying that this is irresponsible spending when the state is headed towards a recession. What do you make of their take on this prison spending?
Well, I try to make my decisions not based on politics, but what's best for my district and the state of South Dakota. We're very lucky. Our former governor helped put this money away, so we have the cash on hand to do this. we've not funded some projects historically, or at least in the last 3 years, to build this fund because we knew it was coming. That's responsible government. So I'm a big fan of having the money in hand to do what we want to do, even though some of the other programs, which I've been an advocate for, were not funded. And if we put this behind us and take the cash on hand to do this, we can go back to a little bit more of normal business. We always have fluctuations in our revenue. COVID threw a little curve in there, and our sales tax went up real high because people were still coming here. But we have highs and lows. That's one reason sales tax isn't used in a lot of local government, is the highs and lows, unpredictability. But I'm a big fan of having the money on hand to do it. I think it's a responsible way to do it. We're going to save about $125 million. I think that's good. Wish we'd have started this process earlier, but I'm going to leave the politics out of it, and each legislator needs to make their own decision based on what information they have.
Taking things really locally here, a recent study came out in the Black Hills showing that some of these sub-aquifers here aren't refilling at the same rate that water is being drawn out. And these are the sub-aquifers more in the urban areas. There's some division, it seems like, on how the state should respond to this information. What do you think this study indicates?
Well, I think we all know that we're drawing a lot of aquifer water. And we've had some dry years, and we're using a lot of water, but the dry years that we've had are influencing this. This year we've had a very wet year. I think that's going to have a significant recharge. But fundamentally, especially in my district, we have two primary aquifers, and you get in the lead and south of the lead, and they're no longer available to you. So Homestake took the lead on this. If you look at they needed water. And their water system is diversified. They have springs, they have wells, they have surface water, and they have protected that water, and they turned that over to Lee Deadwood Sanitary District. That's an example of good management of your resources. They still have a surplus available. So what we need to do is follow a model like that where we do diversify. I'm a big supporter of diversification, including the Western Dakota project. Even if we don't grow, why are we relying solely on aquifers in most areas? The Spearfish Creek is interesting. The county commission protected the headwaters of that many years ago, about 2 decades or more, by putting a conservation easement on the property where those headwaters exist. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's a beautiful place, and that's what is protected. And that protects Spearfish Creek. And Bellefouche has a huge amount of their water coming from a gallery on Spearfish Creek, just like Rapid City has the gallery up by Cleghorn Canyon, where they get a lot of water out of Rapid Creek. So we have to manage this. We need to use a mix of surface water and aquifers, and the Missouri River water, if it goes by us, it's not ours anymore. So the future use permit, which I supported, I was on the legislative oversight for the water board and supported that. I supported it in the legislature too, because we need to capture our rights to that water before it passes through. And we can only do that in certain areas because the dammed areas are under federal control. So this is a state-operated area, and there's very few of those between the dams. Of all respect to the tribes, they need to be engaged on this too. I think it's very important. But overall, we all need the water. If you look at the Minnesota water system and then Lewis and Clark, they've been very, very successful. I sat with a gentleman from Minnesota last week, and they're getting water from the Lewis and Clark down in the south end and in the southeast corner of Minnesota, or southwest, excuse me. And so it's not just us in this battle. And I really think we need to diversify our water, even if we don't have growth.
Yeah, we're hearing with that potential pipeline that you're talking about, we've been told it's likely decades away. This future use permit is for a pipeline that's likely decades away. I'm curious if you think that this study points to a need to maybe expedite this, if it does point to any urgency on getting that pipeline over here.
Well, it's always about the money, right? If you look back to these other water systems off the Missouri, they took decades. If you look at the dams on the Missouri that produce hydro, they took decades. If you look at the interstate system, it took decades. It becomes a priority when it becomes a priority, and we need to look at that. But we need support, financial support from wherever we can get it to build it, and it will only be built when we find that support.
How do you view growth in the region as being related to this? Do you see growth in the region as being something that we should be watching over, just as this latest study has come out?
Well, growth, I always enjoy the conversation on growth and how it works with economic development and infrastructure. And I'll point out that economic development does not always lead to growth. It might just lead to higher paying jobs. But what we're seeing is they found us. We advertised and we went out and had outreach about the Black Hills, and they found us. And that's a concern, circling back to the property tax study, because if we lower property taxes so low, we're going to have more growth, right? If I don't have to pay income tax, my corporate taxes don't exist, I'm a friendly banking state, and my overall taxes are low, I'm going to move to that state. That's why people move here.
Attractive features, of course. Yeah.
And so that promotes growth, no matter what we do. Stagnant areas are not good. You start losing a lot of strength in your school districts, strength in your families. When you have an area that's stagnant, usually your economics go south. Back to our first discussion about the tragedy and your second discussion about the diversity in the parties. Fundamentally, we need strong families, strong moral compass, and we need that across the board. And a stagnant community struggles. I mean, you look at the despair on some of the reservations. Those people don't have options. We don't want that in our other places. We need to help the reservations come out of those economic situations, and we need to do that for our small towns, and we need to monitor what we're doing in our areas like where I live, which we have substantial new building, and there's a balance, right? But we need to look at infill projects rather than sprawl. But in my district, we have so much public land that at a certain time it's going to limit itself, unfortunately. Mm-hmm.
We'll get right into this. We have to do a little rapid fire here, okay, or I think they're going to come and rip us out of the studio. I think we could do the show for 6 more hours, personally. Next legislative session, I mean, we're in the fall right now, or at least close enough, I'll say. So eyes are now on Pierre, as I believe everybody's starting to think about what's this next session going to be looking like. How do you see it shaping up? And you've already shared you previewed one of your bills with us. Yeah. Are there any key bills that you're working on you'd like to share with us about?
Well, I quietly have bills. I had Senate Bill 13 last year. I helped with Senate Bill 20. I did a lot of work on 215. And those are bills people didn't talk about, right? 215 was really important because it gives us an exception or exemption to the merger doctrine. Doesn't mean anything to the public, but to a lot of title companies, land surveyors, and you as a property owner, it helps you. Mm-hmm. So I may have some little things like that. I'm waiting for the reports from the summer studies that come to the executive board and see which ideas we can champion, and then maybe I'll champion one of those. But I don't have anything alarming coming up. There's a lot going on, and as we get closer and see these reports, I think that those things will evolve.
What is your number one goal for next session? We'll close there.
Awareness. I want South Dakota to know my district. I want them to know our needs. Of course, we want to have discussions about the gold severance tax. We want to have other discussions about different things, water projects. We just need to have an open dialogue and get to know the diversity of our state.
Okay, I think we'll end it there. Senate Majority Whip Randy Deibert. Again, Senator, thank you so much for coming in today.
District 31, thank you. Yep, bye-bye.
And that's going to do it.